Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Gus, and I help universities to be more effective when recruiting students online. And recruiting students is important. I mean, enrollment targets are not just there for the marketing department, they affect everything in your institution, from research budgets to how other institutions look upon you. So there's an interesting case of Malaysia that over the past years has been showing very significant growth, especially as a regional player, due to a combination of high quality and available education and favorable policies, and also being a friendly and affordable place to live. So someone who has been in the trenches in Malaysia for a long time and worked in various roles from regional director to marketing is Lay Tin. And today we'll discuss and find out more about the situation on the ground in Malaysia and how you can actually get more impact there. So welcome, Lay Tin. Do please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, Gus. Hi, everyone. My name is Lay Tin, and I have been a higher education marketer for a long time, perhaps 30 over years in that sense. And I work for 8 top reputable brands, education brands. All right. So, as Gus has just mentioned just now, the education scene is very exciting, and there's much growth that can be obtained as far as not just student recruitment, but also the branding, the reputation of Malaysia to attract students from all over the world. So, on that note, I guess I'll be very happy to share more information with all of you.
Yeah, and let's jump right into it. So, but I'm curious of, like, from your point of view, right? Do you see a very big change in how students make a decision of where to study that is probably underestimated by senior leadership in universities in Malaysia?
Right. Yes, I like to focus on the student decision making when it comes to entering universities. As you can see, we're talking about strategic enrollment management over here. Now, in that sense, there are 2 key aspects that we should pay attention to. The first one is the decision windows for students today have actually shortened. So, on that note, students are looking for fast response to the enquiries. The other area they're looking at is also the personalization message, meaning that they are looking at the universities answering their questions. These two are
And
very important factors because they actually start off from the very beginning, the brand touch points. So the brand touch points, if you do it right, the process will be smoother from right from the beginning.
right. And do you find that universities in Malaysia are struggling with providing these fast responses, or do you see that this is something that you're mastering at the moment?
Right. Now, granted that there is automation. So Malaysian universities, they do use the CRM, the tools and AI tools. So if you looked at it, there are responses given to the students. However, I think it's important that the human element plays a very strong part over here to make sure that the close follow up is being done. Now, although it's digital first, all right, as well as the whole digital discovery of the student, it's also important that the team manages that flow, all right, and making sure that the contents are relevant to the students, especially when it comes to stories, peer generated stories, or testimonials from the students, testimonials from the alumni. All these are authentic contents. So we talked about the fact that while there are responses perhaps being given to the students, but they are
Mhm.
generic responses. So I think it's very important that we do the follow up because the students that I've dealt with, they come from foundation or pre-university level right up to the postgraduate level. And when we talk about postgraduate level, there would be courses like the master's program, the MBA, the PhD, the DBA, and that's when you need very specific answers to help them at all
Right.
levels because they could be
Yeah,
asked
not kind
questions.
of like these canned types of responses that you can easily automate. Actually, you need to treat them like a person. But then I imagine if there are lots of inquiries, you have to find a way to sort of balance that with some form of automation. Or how do you look at that?
I would look at it as there is a system to triage or distribute the inquiries. So you have perhaps a filtering system. So if they're asking things like the intakes, the course fees, the program structure, these are all readily available in the website. Provided, of course, the website is done in a what do you call it, in a very much informed manner. All right,
Mm-hmm.
but that is
Yeah.
where the role of the the people come into play, the skilled counselors or the skilled admission staff.
Yeah. So that there is still that room for in-person contact, so to say.
Oh, definitely, because it can't all be on automation. Quite often, I think the students may not have generic questions, so they may have a multiple elements in terms of whether it's confidence level, whether it's in terms of the grades they have, because they come from all over the world. So I think it's important that the questions they have, it could be 3 or 4 questions, are being answered by the counselor, because quite often these are high intent inquiries.
Yeah. So it's also knowing who should get this kind of attention so that they can have their worries relieved and they can have their case considered, they can feel heard, and only then would they be willing or able to confidently move forward.
Yes, agree with that.
Yeah. So you have seen, I'm sure, in your career a lot of inquiry funnels or whatever you call it, right? What do you feel is a recurring blind spot that a senior leadership might not be aware of, but that is something you have to bring to their attention?
On this note, it is important that while you look at the leads on the dashboard, all right, it's also important, besides the volume, to also look at velocity. When I talk about velocity, it's looking at the leads on the dashboard, how you're going to move and manage the leads in the system. Because things which are not well managed will then not be able to produce the right results.
Yeah, I have started in this sector with having a website where I used to answer every inquiry myself. And I know that if I did not answer a question the same day, people would even forget that they asked the question in the first place. They go from hot and they cool down extremely fast. So it's then later on, I have actually worked or provided lead generation for language schools. And I would see that those schools would actually take days. And with that, it's like you go to the supermarket and you buy some very fresh fruits and then you let them sit there, and it's very wasteful, I think. So yeah. I think that's what you mean with velocity, right? If someone shows an intent, you have to get back to them somehow.
Right. So I'd like to add on to that. Ideally, it's within hours, all right? So you're talking about 24 hours to 48 hours window. A lot of this depends on the program, depends on the intake dates and things like that. So these are just general guidelines. But the point is that students want to be heard, right? So when they ask the question, they would expect a response from the university. So that's where perhaps the automation comes in, because automation kicks in quite fast.
Yeah.
But if their questions, like I said earlier on, they're not about facts, then I think that also needs to be addressed. And in Malaysia, for example, because we accept students from all over the world, many countries, of course, particularly could be the ASEAN countries, China, India, as well as the European countries, there are many questions that they have that they would like to pose to us. And especially, of course, when it comes to international students, they'll be looking at things that are relevant to visa, the duration of time to apply for the courses. So the response going back to the students should be within hours, ideally, if not maximum about 48 hours response going back to them. Now, if their staff are going on leave and things like that, I think there is a system in place where the students will then still be attended to, irrespective of the person who's been assigned the lead.
Yeah, so that's actually, what would you say the qualities that are required for someone who would be handling this kind of inquiry? What skills would they need to have?
The important thing is usually the admission staff goes through training. So if they have not gone through any training, which is rarely the case, it's important for them to be empathetic, to feel that all the students are important in the sense that they have a need. They have questions to ask. They have things that they wanted to discuss with the counselors to find out more about the university. So on that note, I find that when we look for staff, it's important they can communicate well, communicate clearly.
Yeah.
And have the
so really treating every person, even if it's just a few lines in an email, you make sure that you're aware that there's a person behind that. I think if people feel that, then it shines through in your messages, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Can you perhaps give me an example where you changed something small in the process or in the mindset of your team that actually had a much more than expected growth as a result in enrollments?
Okay, quite often there is the thinking behind it, like that the staff will follow up with the different inquiries that comes into play. However, I think it's important that we do some tweaks there. For example, if a staff takes a certain number of days, okay, for example, 4 days to respond, and we change it to 24 hours or 1 day, you will find that the results are better
Even
because
if it's the exact same message that they send, that is.
I think, yeah. So to me, it's responsiveness is important. All right. So tweaks may not necessarily be related to budget. As we all know, universities have a certain amount of budget for marketing or for lead generation. Okay. So we work with that. Importantly, I find that if a university is good, the leads come in. And so it's important for us to follow up on the leads in a very diligent manner, and if that's being done, you will find better results. Because as we are all aware, leads can decay over time.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something in an earlier conversation about like if you change the mindset shift to say that, okay, this is not just an inquiry that's sitting there that needs to be answered. This is someone who is making a decision now, and they're either going to enroll with us, or if they get a reply from someone else, they might choose not to enroll with us, but go another way. So we are in a, in a race basically.
Correct.
Yeah. And that, I think it's something that maybe is not always front and center. We feel often that the work we do is just, sort of the checklist we need to fulfill. But then it matters when you do something, not just how you do it or whether you do it at all, but actually how fast is a very, very major factor. If we're looking at assumptions, like kind of like business as usual, which kind of assumption do you feel in Malaysia is costing institutions a lot of students at the moment?
I think one of the things would be if the leader thinks that if they're interested, right, they will wait for us. That is not going to happen. We do know for a long time that students do have choices. However, the choices have actually become more vast. So
Yeah.
for the student, besides looking at the universities in Malaysia, they are also looking at the foreign universities, all right, whether it's branch campuses or universities in other countries, for example, Australia, United Kingdom, Singapore, and so on, including the online providers. So there is quite a wide range of choices that they have. Now, from my experience in discussing during our team meetings with the education counselors, over here we do call them education counselors, but they are basically doing the student recruitment as well.
Yeah.
So I do get the feedback from them that sometimes students says, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're responding to me." Because if you don't respond to me, I'm going to move on to another institution. And I'm so glad that you answered my questions and alleviate my fears about perhaps coming over to KL if they come from another state or if they are from an international country. So coming back to the point, all universities, we talked about systems and processes that can be put in place when you have the budget and resources to put in, as I mentioned, the CRM, the AI tools. But what really makes also the difference is actually the people's touch, the right people to deal with them.
But then you need the processes to make sure that everyone gets that people's touch at the moment that they need it. Because it's true, like even if everything is on the website and the website is crystal clear, people often, they just want this assurance that, I mean, I know I did. When I went to study in Singapore as an exchange student, I was actually amazed. Like their international office was super fast in replying, and I wasn't used to that from my home country. But it made an impression that, okay, if anything goes wrong, right, I can get a response from them. It's super important, even if the response is something that is actually on the homepage of the website. It still is different if it comes after you ask for it, I think.
You talked about impression. I think that's important. It makes the students feel that they're being seen, they're heard, all right? And that adds credibility to the brand, that you care. And constantly we talked about things like brand trust, brand care. These are all part and parcel of the other factors that affects how a students make decisions beyond the academic rankings, beyond the facilities, the campus, and things like that, scholarships. So there are many factors that come into play. As you can see, education is a big investment. And as such, the decision-making process is a bit more complex. However, I think it's towards the last touch point, especially when they make the plan to make enquiries, the feeling, the positive feeling that this is a brand that I can trust that will respond to me. That is a very important factor.
Actually, this reminds me that there is a annual mystery shopping exercise done by an agency where they have a whole group of students pretend that they're a prospective student and
Right.
reach out to different universities globally through different channels, and then just kind of see like how long does it take for the response to come. Is it some kind of procedural and kind of cold bureaucratic message, or do they feel they're speaking to a real person? And there are awards being offered for this as well. I'll share the link in the comments of the video, but I'm not sure if you're aware of that survey, but it's really a hugely underestimated topic. I think also because marketing agencies, if they pitch their products, like, they are generally not the ones that have to do this. Marketing platforms, they do want your advertising dollars, but they don't really care what happens after that. But if you are paying for exposure, if you're paying to make your brand known, you have to make sure that when that yields results, that you follow up. Otherwise, you are just kind of wasting all that effort. So sometimes I think it could be a matter of also choosing to perhaps hire another counselor instead of spending more on a certain ad campaign, just because whatever you generate in enquiries, you need to be able to respond to that as well, or otherwise you might as well not have the enquiry.
Perhaps I want to add on to this. As you can see in Malaysia, the competition in the higher education sector is great. Okay, it's very stiff in that sense. There's a lot of aggressive advertising also being done by some of the big players.
Mm-hmm.
So what we usually do is when we have teams meeting, there is a need to benchmark against the competitors. And I think it's all for the good of growth. You need
Right.
to benchmark good practices that perhaps other people may have already done. And for the teams to look at it and say, yeah, I should do this, I should do better, right? So I think that's a very important factor when you talk about mystery shopping. And that is being incorporated into teams meetings to look at your closest competitor, and closest competitor from the point of view of quite similar products, for example, whether it's going to be business or computer science. Nevertheless, of course, we can also talk about USPs and things like that, the unique selling proposition. Those are a separate topic altogether. But going back, mystery shopping is important to look at how we can learn from competitors, what we have done well, and perhaps what areas we need to improve further.
In marketing, there's always this balance you need to strike between making your brand well known. Like, everyone wants to, of course, be a top ranked university, or at least like within your category, within the type of audience that you are aiming for, you need to be well regarded. And then on the other hand, you need to have performance marketing where you activate people to actually take action, because just, people recognizing your brand, if they don't think it's for them, if they are not being invited to come to webinars or to visit the campus, it's not going to lead to enrollments. So what do you feel is a smart way to balance that? And are there any best practices that you've seen in Malaysia?
A good example would be the time when I worked for Monash University, Malaysia. It's a branch campus of Monash University in Australia. And they ran a campaign, a large-scale campaign called #ChangeIt. It's
Mm-hmm.
about bringing about changes to education, to research, and to development
Mm-hmm.
for the people in Malaysia, for the people around the world. So it is an extension of the program that's being done in Australia itself. Now, as a leader, it's important to manage both, because one brings the emotional buy-in for the students who are interested. Because usually when we attract a particular target segment, they are interested in research, they're interested in making an impact on the world, right? And on the
Yeah.
other hand is there will be spill-on effects onto the what we call the performance marketing. So performance marketing works hand in hand. So when it comes to the advertising, it lends its weight to the brand story, for example. We did quite a number of videos on that, as well as posters, the collaterals, which basically highlights the lecturers making changes to whether it's environment, the traffic security, and things like that. It does have an impact. Perhaps sometimes it may not be immediate by months, but it would be the following intake, if not the subsequent, because the students will look at it as this is a brand where I will be heard and I would like to make some changes to perhaps water conservation, to perhaps diabetes, things like that, especially when you run a wide range of programs. So this is one example I can give you, which was done, of course, at a global scale. Now, for other universities, they would also have done things like that, but perhaps at a different level, depending on the resources given.
Yeah. And actually, if you strip away the brand, then people are just comparing the program, just the very, just the characteristics of the program. So what am I going to learn? Where is it based? How much does it cost? And that's it. And it's a very dry comparison. So you want to build some emotion into this. But it does take guts, I think, from leadership to be willing to put the time and the money into it, and to also have the patience of seeing that develop into leads, because it may not be for this year. You may be running the campaign this year, you may be paying for it, but you will still need to do all your performance marketing campaigns and actions just the same way to make this year's numbers. But then next year, it may start to have a little impact. And over time, you are building up a reputation there. I guess it depends a lot how much the leadership team can see that, and how well, let's say, as a marketing director, you're able to make your case as well. Let's say you are talking to a vice chancellor and they are struggling with student recruitment, right? If they ask you, where do I start? What do I check out first? What would be the first data point that you look at?
So I have had experience with universities that are going through either a stagnation in the student population or a decline in the new intakes coming in, right? Mm-hmm. So what's important is basically at the end of the day, measurement counts. I would be looking at enquiry to application for a start. Mm-hmm. Now, there are also other factors that move on, like, for example, enquiry to the application, to offers, to enrollment, to retention. So the dashboard as well as the reports would show. For marketing heads, usually they have, they will look at from enquiry to application. Okay. In some cases, like one of the university that I was in, I could move all the way down to retention. So I think it's very important. It depends on the CEO or the vice chancellors. My suggestion is let's look at it from the beginning to the end. And why? Because retention is a very important factor. Especially retention from the foundation or pre-university level. They move on as students for the undergraduate degree as well as the postgraduate. So you actually have a ready pipeline. Of course, you won't have 100%.
Yeah.
Past experiences have shown that about 80 over percent up to 90 will move on from one stage to the next if you look after them well. So I like to talk on the retention part, which quite often in some universities, they don't have access to that.
Yeah. So it's really knowing, like when you know sort of all the goalposts that people pass through, then you can actually very clearly pinpoint, okay, this works well. And it looks like we have a leak here because we're not retaining as many people as you would expect. And then you can be really very focused. So you can leave all the other things that work okay and really focus on what is causing the pain. But I guess it depends on the institution as well, what kind of access to this kind of data they have. It comes with systems again, with CRM and with...
So I guess at the end of the day, a lot depends on the CEO. How painful is the problem?
Yeah.
And there are ways to resolve it. Okay, that's what I'm saying. There are solutions to it. So we talk quite a bit about mindset and things like that. I would like the team to have this problem solving mode, critical thinking, empathy that we talked about. So it's important.
Especially not ducking away, like when there is a problem, kind of trying to hide it. But actually, if the intake was a disappointment, then that is something that we can get together and we can find out how we can do better next time. We have to learn from it.
Yeah, and you got to learn it fast. Okay, so quite often you find that I talked about the word fast. Okay, now for any organization to do well, there are three areas. One is being fast in many areas. We're talking about speed over here, right? Even to pinpoint a problem and get it rectified. The other area is cost, being cheaper, which also means operational efficiency. correct? And being better than your competitors. So quite often when we talk about organizations, how can you do well? It's always these three areas that you want to think about.
Yeah, and you want to continually be learning as well. Like even
Yeah,
if
so as
you
long
are the
as
fastest
sustainable.
or the most efficient,
Correct.
you are not going to be tomorrow because everyone is catching up as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and to be sustainable in that sense. But when I talk about fast, I think the word is also timeliness. It's
Hmm.
important that sometimes you can't push for a decision from the student if they are not ready for the intake, which means they have not had the results yet, the actual results or the forecast results, correct? So many things come into play, and that's where I go back to my earlier points about the human intervention.
Yeah, yeah, but that's true. I've seen, and I've worked with clients that have been very eager to make their intake numbers. And, there is a certain amount of follow up that will be considered helpful. And there is also a point of going overboard. If you've told them that you will make a decision in 2 weeks, like don't keep pushing. That doesn't help. And it's just a waste of energy, basically. But sometimes there is that kind of pressure, and it could be hard for a counselor to resist that.
I guess on that note, before they approach that situation, it's important to be aware of the situational analysis, correct?
Hmm.
Before
Yeah.
you contact. So if you looked at it, there is quite a lot of work that an education counselor, or in some cases you may call them the student recruitment staff, have to do. You do not annoy your client, so to speak, or you do not annoy the student, which means you must have the full picture in front of you. If they have not had the results, then I think it's important that you follow up with, when it comes to personalized message, it's about the content that educates the students and not push for
Yeah.
a
And
decision
make them
immediately.
welcome once they do have the results to then
Correct. Yeah.
get in touch again, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's been great, Lay Tin. It's been a pleasure learning from you what works and what are challenges in Malaysia. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Gus, for your time today.